Okay, we'll go ahead and go then.
Thank you
Thank you very much for joining us this morning in our budget development meeting. This is a continuation from the meeting on March 5th, March 5th? We were not able to finish that discussion, so this is an opportunity to finish that discussion. We'll go ahead and get started.
Roll call.
Ruth, could you please call the roll?
Yes, sir. Adamson?
Unmute.
Here.
It is. You're live right now.
Okay, here. Bray? I can't hear him. Can anyone hear
He's
him?
unmuted.
Okay, he may not be able to hear me.
Sorry.
Ray? No.
Okay, Mayor, can you help me out?
Okay,
Bray?
yes.
Yes, Bray?
Roll call?
Here.
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 Cheetah?
Cheatham?
Cheatham?
Here.
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 Lurick?
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 Here.
Ortega?
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 Here.
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 Stevens?
Stevens?
Stevens? Can you unmute?
Yes, I thought you were doing that from down there. I'm here.
Okay. Yep, you got it. Okay. Here. Okay, maybe we've got this worked out now. Thank you for being here. Thank you very much. We will go ahead and move to agenda item number 2, fiscal year 2021 budget development.
Council discussion.
Council will continue their discussion from March 5, 2020 budget development meeting. Council will determine policies, guidelines that will give staff direction regarding the city's fiscal year 2021 budget. So with that, I think what will be easiest is if we will just have, we'll start with Chris, and we'll just go from seat 1 to seat 6. If everyone will just stay muted and let them present some of their ideas, we'll go for about 5 minutes for each person, and then we'll have discussion on all of them. So please take notes so that we know what we've got going, and hopefully we can make this so we're not talking over each other all the time. And so with
This
that,
conference will now be recorded.
that we'll get going with this, then we'll give it a shot. So Chris, I'm going to turn the time to you, and I'm going to mute. Thank you.
Okay, just so people at home understand, we have what our CFO described to me as a decentralized city structure, which means every department is largely an entity unto itself. This is a positive in that it allows each department a fairly high degree of fiscal and operational dependence, but it can be a challenge when the city as a whole attempts to study itself. That being said, I want to acknowledge the high degree of positive interaction and collaboration that I have witnessed among departments and individual staff. Council members should have 3 pages of written thoughts I prepared for this and subsequent meetings. They could not be sent out in advance due to open meeting laws. I will be posting these for folks at home on my Facebook page. We discussed the dire financial circumstances our whole country is in, the globe is in at the moment, and I think everybody's very aware of that. But it seems a foregone conclusion that between our fiscal difficulties and new legislation, we're going to have to make judicious reductions at the city level. We're a municipal corporation, and I believe all corporate decisions should be driven by a central philosophy. My view is that the city of Pocatello exists for the purpose of benefiting our essentially involuntary investors or stockholders, those being our tax and fee payers, and therefore every decision we make must first meet the criterion of maximum service and benefit to the taxpayers and residents of this city. Here are just a few highlights from my list of budgeting policy recommendations. First, I believe it's important that we, should we have to eliminate jobs, we eliminate as few as possible. But we also need to reduce the annual budget by, I believe now, a minimum of 5%, and maybe more as indicated by projected revenues and unavoidable expenses. And Brian, based on the conversation you and I had, golly, 2 weeks ago maybe, you had indicated that week you were going to talk to department heads about the essentially inevitability of having to do budget tightening. So I'm glad you took that on yourself and have already kind of set the stage. I believe we need to begin with database projections of income, fixed costs, and the difference, because that essentially is our discretionary income. I believe we need to create guidelines for ranking, granting, and reporting on non-departmental funds, meaning community organizations, nonprofits that we include in our budget. I believe we need to create a system that assures set-asides for large projects, realizing that we may not be able to make budgetary allocations in years like this when we're under duress. I believe that we can secure funding for 1 year of TNR from the existing shelter unfilled position and or the unfilled city economic development position and or the unused money for the logo. Here is some research I believe would support our budgeting process. One, I direct the CFO to provide a written expense analysis and recommendations for financial curtailments and efficiencies. Two, direct the HR director to do a staffing analysis and recommend places where we can create the least public harm if we have to do staff reductions. Three, direct each department to conduct a goals, tasks, personnel analysis divorced from how we are accustomed to doing things to determine the leanest possible operational model for their department. I believe we need to use annual budget comparisons going back a number of years to identify areas where we have had really large increases. I realize healthcare will be one of those, and determine whether or not those increases were actually warranted. And the final two, examine overtime expenditures by departments, identify departments with high overtime expenditures and ask them to develop potential solutions that do not result in overtime. And I believe that we can, without undue harm, eliminate the shelter supervisor position and reorganize the staffing chart at the shelter for a budgetary savings. Thank you.
Brian, you're muted.
I forgot I was muted. Thank you. Chris, is there anything that was a quick 5 minutes? Is there anything else that you just have to get out there real quick, and then we'll come back through and see if there's anything else after everybody's done. But you want to? Oh, you're muted, Chris. You're muted.
Folks should have. I was told that what I prepared would be emailed out, so everybody should have a copy of it. And I think I don't need to waste people's time by reading to them what they can read. Basically, my thinking went from macro to specific.
Okay.
I don't think
Perfect. Thank you very much. We'll jump over.
are part of policy.
Okay. Claudia. Yeah, thank you.
Good morning, everybody. My ideas are less in number than Chris's. I would like to start with having each department evaluate and report how this partial shutdown because of the pandemic has affected the delivery of services. I would also like every department to come in with a 5% reduction. I think every department needs to present what their needs will be within the next 5 years with regard to equipment, software, things like that, so that we can plan rather than having to react when something is needed. I would like to see a hiring freeze across the board for the next year. I think the council mayor raises from last year should be rescinded. And I really would like to see a new policy where only department heads have P cards and only department heads handle the purchasing. Because right now, it's really concerning to me that we have a lot of credit card expenses every single month because essentially half of our city employees have city credit cards, and there's not a lot of oversight as to what's spent. And to have multiple hundreds of thousands of credit card purchases every month, I think we need to know exactly what we're spending it on, and the best way to do that is to just have department heads handle that. And that's all I got.
Okay, well, as you think about it as we go on, we'll come back around and one last time for a second. Okay, Roger.
Well, it's a far different backdrop that we're talking to today than it was on the 5th of March. And I want to begin by thanking our employees for standing strong during this crisis and struggling to find out how to work together in new ways. I really think the first place we got to go is to define the context. And of course, the obvious things are the COVID-19 pandemic and the resulting economic disturbance or recession that it could be causing. The second context I think we need to address is the fact that Pocatello is the top taxing city of the major cities in Idaho. I've developed a chart that shows that we are much higher than we were prior to the time of payment in lieu of taxes. We're about 17% higher than the 4 years prior. The third context I think we got to address is the high assessed values of last year. Those are realities that are challenging our people, and we're called upon to be responsive. Now, that's the context. I see the process as going forward in many ways. We don't know what the shelter at home thing has done in terms of our efficiency as a city, and we don't know what it has done to businesses here. There may be several businesses that don't survive because no business means no income, and it's just hard. I think we got to address the reality that fuel consumption and highway use is way down from what it's been, and that's going to hit us hard in terms of the highway user income tax that we receive from the state. The third item is the sales tax decline. We know that it's going to be something that really hits us hard. There was a reduction at the state level of about $1 million is all in March, but the governor, and I'm gonna, if you read the article that came in our emails today from the Post Register, it talked about how the governor has asked for a 1% holdback right now from all departments. But he's also gone ahead and said that by June 1st, all departments need to have a proposed 5% rollback going for the 21-22 budget. I mean, the 2021 budget. And so that was an article by Nathan Brown. We also need to understand that property values can really crater in an economic downturn. They did last time. We understand that unemployment is projected to be, I think Chris alluded to at some point, maybe it was prior, but the unemployment is projected to go out of sight from 13 to 20%. If the stock market doesn't come back, we got a lot of retirees who are going to have hits on their income because they're not going to have the income stream that they had prior. We also got to realize that in 2008 and that recession that we went through, we need to know that we were better prepared as a city, not because of anything we could do as a city, but because we had about $1 billion of investment coming into our city with Hoku and the hospital. That money turned over in the midst of a recession in our community, and it helped us get through it more securely than most cities. We don't know what's going to happen with new construction and mobility. You know, we thought there were going to be a lot of people building and a lot of people buying and a lot of people moving in, but we don't know what that will do right now. I know several people in the construction industry that said they just shut down to see where they're going. We don't know if there's any help coming to us as municipalities. There's some alluded to be coming to the state, but I don't know about municipalities. I also want to bring this up. The cost of living index will probably rise in the midst of this because of the cost of health care, and that includes health insurance. I know we've had great debate, but I went back, I found the address where it's definitive about it. It's the Bureau of Labor Statistics.gov, CPI fact sheets, medical care, and it reads in there, the medical care index is one of 8 major groups.
I'm muted. Roger, I'm sorry. We just had you start. I don't know. It sounded like gibberish. Can you back up and start over for about 30 seconds ago? Sorry about that. Let's see if that helps.
Okay. We need to know that medical expenses in terms of healthcare expense and insurance is a part of the cost of living index, the CPI. I found the definitive thing. If you go to www.bls.gov CPI fact sheet, you're going to find in there that they've got a whole formula by which they calculate the healthcare cost in there. I'm just going to quote a minor part of that. It says, medical care services, the larger component in terms of weight in the CPI, is organized into 3 categories: professional services, hospital and related services, and health insurance. Now, they've updated this since I first looked at it, and they updated it on the 20th of March this year, and it didn't change. So we need to know that healthcare is a part of adjusting the cost of living. Okay, so those are the background things. Here's the policies I think should be implemented. We should anticipate, based on the 1% holdback the governor's doing and the 5%, and the fact that the state's getting money where we may not, we should have a minimum 6% working range for our reductions. That means every department should come in and tell us how we will be able to find 6% savings if this thing continues to go south. We should have a hiring freeze, no hirings happening. We should anticipate limiting current budget expenses so that we can harvest as much from this year's budget as we can. Health insurance premiums will likely skyrocket because there are a lot of companies that have said they will pay for the whole meal deal in this epidemic. So we should do everything we can do to hold our employees harmless on these raises. I don't think we should have them increased in the share they pay. We should absorb the increases without seeking too much in cost sharing for our people. Raises need to be on hold unless they're embraced by other budget cuts. It's hard to give a raise when the economy's falling apart. I think staff reductions should be resisted, but they can't necessarily be held as off limits. I don't want to do staff reductions, but it could be that we we have to do that in order to make things work. So there's my fast overview of several things. And if you have questions, I'll answer them later or now. You're muted, Brian.
Sitting on me. Okay, there we go. My timer, I'm trying to get it to stop going. Okay, there we go. Thank you, Roger. We will jump over to Heidi. Okay, see if that one works.
Okay, can you hear me through the mayor's? Give me a thumbs up if you can. Okay, sorry, we're having issues with this other device. So I've already mentioned the one that that I thought would be beneficial, which is to have a comparison with other cities. But I think given the current climate, which has already been mentioned, I know we have staff that's under a lot of stress. They're going through, you know, a lot of issues trying to get the finances and stuff like that in order for the city, and a lot of department heads that are trying to look at the stuff that you've mentioned. I mean, everybody's well aware of the current situation we're in. So I'm willing to pass on that for now unless somebody else feels strongly about that. I think it's better to streamline our budgeting process and be able to get it done expediently and efficiently rather than dragging it out, adding a lot of new things. So that's all I really had to,
That's kind of good.
yeah.
Okay. All right, I'm coming back in. All right. Then let's go to Linda.
Okay, can you hear me? Yes, good. Okay, so first I also wanted to thank our mayor and staff for all of your hard work during this difficult situation. I also want to say that I firmly believe that it is of the utmost importance for us as council members to be responsible stewards of our taxpayer dollars. That is and always should be our guiding principle for budget development, as well as all other decisions that we make. And then during difficult times like we're in right now, I think we need to be especially conscientious and diligent in our process. In my experience, I've found that the budget process we use is an extremely thorough and extensive process. It follows the latest Government Finance Officers Association, the GFOA, recommended policies and best practices for local government. So I feel that we need to continue to follow that process, and that it does allow us to do the deep dive and the heavy lifting that is required. During that process, we're going to receive salary projections, revenue estimates, and detailed department presentations with budget builds and requests. And then we go into tax solution, where we're going to make the really tough decisions about what we need and what we can't do in our budget, what we will do and what we won't be able to do. So my request for that process is that each department come in as conservatively as possible with their budget builds and requests, that they continue to look for efficiencies and savings wherever possible, and also detail in their presentation to us how they have done that. I'd like to see the breakdown of the type of funds used to support each department's budget, whether it's actually taxpayer funds or grant funds or internal service funds, etc. We've been given some of that information in the past, but I'd like to see that breakdown added to each department's budget presentation. And during the budget presentations, I suggest that we continue the practice of keeping several running lists, and then we will revisit those when we make the final decisions during tax solution. Those lists in the past have included all personnel requests, so we consider all of those together at the end. Items definitely going in the budget, one-time items to be paid out of capital contingency, what we call wish list items, but that we keep those running lists so that we can make the tough decisions at the end. And lastly, I'd suggest that we add a couple of extra meetings for tax solution. I think that that's going to likely be a much more difficult discussion this year. So I think we need to give ourselves enough time to have that discussion fully. I also believe that we are in a very difficult situation, but I think that we will return to normal at some point, and maybe it's a new kind of normal, but I think we will get back to some kind of normal, and we need to keep our city running, and we have to go on. So I think we will manage to do that, and we will get through these tough times with the help of all our wonderful staff. So I just think we need to tighten up as much as we possibly can and have our departments present to us how they would do that. And that's all I have.
Okay, thank you. Then we are now going to go to Rick.
Well, by the time I hear the wisdom of my 5 predecessors, there isn't much left to say, I think, this morning. But I think we need to be careful not to panic here. Yeah, we're in some tough times. But until we get into some information about how we can really project our income to be affected by what's been going on, I think it's a little premature to begin some radical changes. The Association of Idaho Cities is working on, with the state, some potential income projections of what might happen. And that information isn't available yet, but should be coming in the next couple of weeks. We're already halfway through this year, and we haven't been affected much. I'm sure when the tax revenue comes out for March, that's going to be affected somewhat, and that should begin to give us an indication of what we might expect for the balance of this year and on into next year. I don't have any real things to add to what's already been said. I think I agree a lot with what Linda said. The things I had on my list basically are exactly what she had. So I'll end it there, and we can proceed.
Okay, thank you for that. We do have some items to discuss, but before we jump into the middle of those, did anybody think of anything else that they would like to just kind of throw out there for some consideration right now at this point? Okay, I'll do that. No, I'm not muted. Okay, Chris.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with what Councilman Cheatham is saying. I believe that we can't make thoughtful decisions until we know not only what our income looks like, but I also am a firm believer that we can at least create a thoughtful estimate of what our projected expenditures are. So I agree with Councilman Cheatham, but I extend that thought to include at least taking a stab at projecting projecting expenses, because income in a context devoid of knowledge about potential expenses, we could be talking complete pie in the sky and not even know it.
Okay, thank you. I think that why don't I just let you know what I have and how I've instructed the staff and what I've asked the staff to be looking at as they are planning and looking at their budgets. What we've done is we've had a couple meetings as we've gone through this pandemic, as they're sitting and they're doing all the work right now. And I've asked them to evaluate everything that the necessary and the essential and the non-essential things, evaluate and look and see if there's any places that they can trim down or cut back to see what happens as we're moving into next year, knowing that right now we are going to have some people that are struggling. We've got a lot of businesses. Right, if the governor lifts this order in the next couple of weeks, we're probably going to be able to bounce back fairly good. If it continues on into the middle of May and toward the end of May, I think it's going to do a lot more damage than it's going to be than what we anticipate right now. And so we have, I know that there are banks, every bank out there are contacting their customers right now about their small business customers about getting the financial help from the federal government. And so those things are happening, and they're out of our control. We can't really do anything about that other than we need to be mindful of it. And I agree with that. I have asked the departments to come to look at their budgets and come in at the very minimum flat, but come in with reductions or at least some suggestions of what they can put off for a year or two in equipment and different things that may be able to save us some money. And so I think some of this they've already started to look at and to plan for as we move forward with their budgets. And so that's kind of the direction that we've gone right now, and we'll continue to go down that direction. And I will work with them as they put their budgets together, and then they're able to present to us. I believe that that our revenues discussion will happen. Okay, it's preliminary. Having a hard time saying that today. That will happen on the 23rd. So we should be able to have that discussion first. That will include things like fuel, gas tax, sales tax, and all of those things. I think we'll be able to have that discussion, and so we should be able to have all of those before we get into the real budgets, and then it's a matter of presenting the budgets. And I think it's important for us to listen to them and then making those decisions after we've heard what cuts can be made and then go from there. But that being said, I think we've got some good things to talk about here. So I'm not exactly sure how we want to address these things. Should we just go down through everybody's list? What do you think? I think that I mean, Chris, you definitely gave us the most comprehensive list, so thank you for that. And I think we can go through these things. I think a lot of them are going to be taken care of in the presentations, but I think it's important for us to talk about some of these things. So who wants to go first?
I'll go first, Mayor.
Okay, thanks, Roger.
I really think that preparedness requires us to have our staff looking at reductions. If we don't have to go there, we don't have to go there. But I think it has to be a systemic look, not just a postponement of some other things. The systemic look, we ought to be looking at least at what the governor is suggesting all the state do, and that is a 5% proposed reduction. He's not saying he's going to implement it. I'm not saying we're going to implement it. But the ability to be able to be responsive to downturns is to anticipate they could come. Not that they will come, but they could come. So therefore, I would say that we at least need to go at the 5% level the governor is asking of all the state agencies for the next budget year.
So is your suggestion that they just cut 5% or be prepared if asked what else we can do, we can cut?
Well, I don't want to be going back and looking at this 2 or 3 different times. To me, what the governor has said is you figure out how in your agency, your department, you would cut 5% if need be. I think it behooves all of our department heads to do the same type of introspection in terms of their department. It's just parallel with what the state is doing. And I really think it helps us to address situations that can arise.
So when the budget is presented, I guess I'm getting confused because I understand the idea of what can we cut if we have to, what is available. But when the budget is being presented, we decide what taxes are going to be, what we're going to do with taxes and how the levy rate's going to move and how the dollar amounts are going to move. Are you suggesting that they come in with their budgets just all hacked down 5%? Or are you suggesting that in the event, I mean, come in as low as they can, but also recognize if we need to do something, if the council feels we need to go deeper and harder, that we can find it there? What
I'm saying is that the governor at the state level has already assessed the situation through his advisors, that it behooves the state to have proposals on the table by which 5% reductions can occur. What I'm saying is, if we're going to make lists for what we might spend extra, we ought to make lists for what we might not spend because things are going down. And the only way I have of making those good decisions are through the expertise of our department heads and their staffs. I need them to be instructing me what areas.
So as part of that, would that include them bringing to us what services that would need to be cut in order to realize that 5%? And that way the council is the one deciding what services are going to be affected and are not going to be affected.
Yes, it's up to us to do the heavy lifting there, but they need to be able to target for us the areas in which decisions could be exercised. So if we're going to have a list on one side that if everything goes good, let's put it over here and hope we can do it. Put another list together over here and say, it's over here and we hope we don't have to do it. That's all I'm saying.
Okay, Claudia, you had something. I saw your hand kind of waving at us.
No, I think that if I understood Heidi, when Heidi spoke earlier, she doesn't want to burden departments with more work. I agree with the governor, and I think that departments need to come in with their budget at 5% less than, not flat, 5%. And that way we can decide, because I think that there are going to be, this pandemic has created a situation where people have to be creative. And I think that it's entirely possible that we've got some really creative people and innovative people working for the city who can figure out ways to reduce the city's expense in their department by 5%. And that's not an automatic staffing. That's not necessarily service, but maybe how services are performed. That's why one of the things I was hoping was to hear from department heads how this current situation has affected the delivery of services.
Okay. Okay, I'm going to hand my surface back over to Heidi. She's got something to say here.
Just to clarify what I meant by my comment, I know that the departments already have a lot of extra work that they're doing right now because of the pandemic and because the mayor has asked them to look at where they might potentially make some cuts. And so I didn't mean that they can just sit back and do nothing. Obviously, they will be, looking at their budgets and trying to do what they can, but I just meant as it relates to digging up that extra information from other cities, I was okay with holding off on that. That's what I meant. Okay, thanks.
All right. Okay, Chris.
So somebody correct me if I'm wrong, but I think 5% is $50,000 per million. And when you think about it in those terms, it seems as though it ought to at least be a productive, creative exercise to see if out of a multi-million-dollar department budget, it would not be possible to come at least close to finding $50,000 per million in savings. The other thing that I think we need to think about is this is an unusual year. And I believe we need to try to let go of maybe some of the processes or the order in which we've done certain things budget-wise in the past. This is an unusual year, and it may require an unusual, well, it will undoubtedly require an unusual process. But I think we should look at that as an opportunity rather than a burden. But 50,000 per million sounds a lot different than some hypothetical 5% when you have no idea what you're actually talking about in dollars.
Okay, anyone else want to weigh in? So I think what I think that the staff is listening and hearing to come in with a budget that's definitely leaner than flat. And I think it's important for us to let them put that budget together and see what it looks like, and then us listen to it and then us have the discussion to see what's happening there. It's kind of what my thought process is right now. I don't know what everybody else is thinking. Linda?
Mayor, I'd like to weigh in on that. I agree that these are kind of unusual times that we're in, and there's a lot of uncertainty and unknowns. But to me, that makes it even more important that we use the process that we have used. That is something that we do know and can keep consistent with. And I think that process works. It is the recommended best practices. So I would like to see the process continue the way that it has in the past. That being said, that doesn't mean that we can't look at some different things within the budget. But I would like the process to remain the way that it has, because I think that's what our staff know, and that keeps that consistency in a time where there is a lot of uncertainty. I am thinking that, you've already asked staff to look at possible reductions. I think a minimum of keeping it flat actually is reducing because costs go up all the time. So when you look at a flat budget, you're talking about anywhere from 2 to 5% reductions anyway. But in addition to coming in flat, if they can come in and present any possible reductions, or even not necessarily permanent cuts, but things that they can put off or live without for a year or two. If there are major projects that maybe could be delayed until we have a more certain time that we're in. So I would like to see us stay with the process that we have, but have our department heads be as judicious as they can possibly be, and just present what they would either cut from their budget or what they feel they could maybe put off for a while in their budget. And that's all.
Okay, sounds good. Claudia, you're looking to say something.
I think that clear guidance makes everything easier for the people that we're asking to do this work. So to leave it open is really gives, there's too many choices, too many options, too many, well, maybe I'll just look at 1% or 2%. I think that the department heads, that's why they're department heads. They've got to make tough decisions, and they've got to, do that hard job of leading a department. And I think clear guidance with a clear number of what we want in reduction is going to make it a lot easier for them, because then there's no room for interpretation. We need to see 5%. I mean, and if it's good enough for the state, I think it's definitely good enough for the city. And I have full faith and confidence in the department heads of this city that they're at least as competent and as qualified and as capable as the heads of departments that run the state.
When you're talking about a percentage, are you including the enterprise departments in this? So like water, or are you thinking that's a different?
I've already asked them to look.
Okay, the mayor's saying he did ask them to look at possible reductions.
Let's see what they're at there. So I have asked them to do that and look at it and see what a reduction there would look like as well. Recognizing when we don't follow a rate study, eventually we have to bite the bullet and increase a tremendous amount, which I think, Roger, you're the only one that was on the council back in, what was it, 12 or 13, that we had to redo or increase. I think it was either water or WPC, like 13 or 14%. And so I've asked them to look at that and what it would do and what projects we could take off where we may not have to jump into the middle of a huge increase in, 7 or 8 years, when we've got a different mayor and council out there and they have to make that, bite that bullet. But they've been asked to do that. So I'm trying to put down here some of the thoughts of what I'm hearing to do. Obviously, I think it's obvious that we're looking for the departments to come with a reduction in their budget, to see what is reduced. And I think that they're all looking at that right now. If they're at least following the lead there that they've been given to come with a reduced. I'm hearing the process, and quite frankly, the process that we've got right now, I think, is that very process. The departments come in. Well, first of all, we look at revenues and we have that discussion about revenues and everything. And then the departments come in, they'll give us their presentations. I think we need to be watching those. I think when insurance has been mentioned here, that's going to be a big topic. And I know that Heather's working hard on the insurance end of things. I know she's going to get with this as soon as she can get the numbers and stuff. And I know that Blue Cross is fighting her on those numbers, and we've got our vendor that is working hard to try to get those. And so hopefully she can get those to us. We've always guessed in the past a little bit, and we're hoping to get those numbers probably June-ish. We're hoping for May, and see if we can get that. And so those numbers are definitely going to affect a little bit of what's going on, but I still think we need to have the departments presenting the way they've presented, and give us ideas of what they can live without. Make the lists like we've done. I think, Roger, you're the one, you suggested the list still. I think, I'm not sure of what we have and don't have, what we need and what we don't have. Somebody did anyway. I thought I wrote it down. But, and then do that process of what we can, what we're willing to do and move forward with things like that. I'm just doing a lot of rambling. I'm trying to figure out how to pull it all together that everybody's some suggestions, and so I'm looking for any help that might be out there. Linda,
Mayor,
you-
could I ask a question?
Absolutely.
Yeah, on the enterprise funds, and the departments that, are enterprise funds, if they were looking at 5% cuts, so then we wouldn't be following the rate study, and you said that would mean a big hit later on. How are they, you've talked to them already and asked them to look at possible reductions. I'm just curious how they're looking at that. Are they thinking about not following the rate study, or are they finding other ways to reduce? I mean, what are they looking at?
So
Do you have any idea?
that's a great question. What I did was, and I didn't say reduce everything. What I asked them to do is, what does it look like if we do not follow that rate study? I believe we're scheduled to go at 3%.
Right.
And
one is 4
across the board, and ask them what happens if we go at 2% opposed to a 3% increase in that, and what projects that need to be done can be put off, what projects can we not put off, as the rate study has said. So for them to reduce their budget, I didn't ask them to do that. I asked them to what the effect would be if they reduced the increase that we are going to do, recognizing that if we reduce that increase, we don't follow that rate study, in a few years we will literally have to increase it, who knows, 7, 8, 12%. I think in 2000, and don't quote me on this, but I think in 2012, I think it was, that we had to increase the utilities. I mean, water was like 7 or 8%. WPC was like 12%. Sanitation was like 6 or 7%. It was just a tough year because we hadn't followed that rate study. And I don't want us to fall behind on the rate study. We've paid good money for that. It's all factually backed up of why we need to do those things. And so I just want them to look at that and ask them to see what it looked like.
Thank you. And I agree that trying to follow that rate study as closely as possible is really important, because I think that we could get in a really bad situation down the road if we don't follow that closely. So when those departments present to us, could they present those, and maybe you already asked them to do this, but if they go with a lower rate, could they present that as a potential scenario and just show us what it would mean, but not that that's how they come in. I mean, not that they pick one option and then just come in and present that as their budget, but
Sure.
they have a budget and then they come in and present some other scenarios. Is that how they're planning to look at this?
Yeah, I think so. I haven't given them that exact direction, but I think that's what they would plan on doing. This is what would happen if we came in, instead of 3%, we did 2%. This is what it would look like and what we would be able to do and not do. And these are the projects it will affect.
Okay. And that's my, in general, that's my reluctance to just saying to every department to come in 5% lower, because then I feel like we're not seeing the potential options that, the options that we might have in the future to select from, basically. I would like them to present their budget and be as conservative as possible and find things that they could live without for a while and that kind of thing, and show us maybe some potential reductions. But I would like us to make those decisions and look at what the possibilities are. And with the enterprise funds departments, I think it's, we did pay for that rate study, and I think that we need to follow that as closely as we possibly can.
Sure. Okay, Chris has something.
Yeah, I think we're dancing around an elephant that's sitting on the table just a bit here. Back in on March 5th or whatever day we last had a conversation like this, we talked about the fact that, and Councilwoman Lurick alluded to this earlier, that certain departments, depending on where a department derives its funding, it may make more or less sense to require a flat reduction. I think everybody should have to go through the same exercise, but for example, if a department derives 90% of its funding from federal sources, you know, it may be very difficult. However, I don't think that that relieves council of making the tough decisions, because I do believe that we need to be in a position and have the information required to be able to make a 5% reduction in the city budget. And that means that there may be departments who are more or less able to do that, depending on the services they provide and their specific funding situation. But I don't think that we can use that as an excuse to say, oh, well, we just can't reduce. So that's point number one. I think we have to, you know, equity is great, and everybody likes to think that equity means equal, but equity actually has a very different meaning than equal. It doesn't mean the same. It means equitable given the context. The second thing that I'm not willing to let drop without conversation really speaks to Council President Adamson's notion that we don't, under these circumstances, necessarily want to create a lot of extra work for our staff. And I agree with that. However, again, I do not believe that we can continue to kick the fiscal analysis can down the road. And I believe that within our budgeting process, we need to identify what kind of analytical exploration we need to do fiscally, what kind of research we need to do, and not just kick it down the road and be back and having this essentially this same conversation again next year. Thank you.
Okay, anyone else? I'm trying to write some notes down real quick, and so. Anyone? Roger, there you go.
Mayor,
Yeah.
I hit the button, but it went through twice. I don't know what best practices are, because either we're practicing them and the governor isn't, or the governor is and we aren't, because he's requiring a 5% overview. He's not saying he's going to exercise it, but he wants his department heads to do an analysis of how the department could absorb a 5% downgrade or downturn or reduction if the situation precipitates it. It's much easier to do that in advance and move towards what is developing than it is to scurry at the last minute and do that. So the proposal is not to bring in a 5% lower budget. It's to bring in a budget that has the opportunity to exercise a 5% reduction. There's a big difference.
Well, I think what I'm understanding from that is what you're saying is come in, explain what services are going to be affected, what's going to happen with these 5%, but this is the 5% reduction. And then council, you decide what services you're okay with living with and what services you want to keep, and then we go from there is what I'm hearing. So I think that the department heads, I'm sure most of them are watching and listening to this, but I will also make sure that I reiterate this with them, that when they prepare their budgets, prepare with a reduction and prepare with the reduction, what the services are going to be affected, what their services are, what are necessary services to continue on, and what we need to continue to do. But I think it's in, and so we will do that. I think that's a fair thing, and then we can have the debate whether or not we're willing to cut those services that the citizens have become reliant on and stuff like that. So we can do that. Now, can we move? I think they've got that message.
Can I ask a question as a department head?
No, let's not start having department head ask questions. I'll answer questions and get with the council if I need to then. Chris, you have something you'd like to say?
Well, I'm willing to further my reputation as a bête noire, meaning the black beast, by saying that, Mayor, I hear implicit in your comments that the only arena in which potential savings will be harvested are in services to the public. And I do not want to set off some kind of employee panic, but I believe that the city may be in the same situation in at least a few cases as all of our businesses are, or most of our businesses are, which means that we may be furloughing or freezing hiring and absorbing personnel by reassignment, etc. I am not advocating that that is the go-to place, but I also believe that we need to not accidentally communicate to our public that they are the only people who may have to endure unfortunate circumstances when they are being laid off, furloughed, fired, whatever, from their work positions. I do not believe we can just summarily exempt our city employees from that very upsetting possibility. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. We've got on here a couple other things that I want to get to in moving with this. We had on here, and I believe I think, Claudia, you mentioned a 5-year needs for the future. I think most departments, if not all, already have that kind of put together. We've gone through that, and so I think that I can just ask them to kind of be prepared to answer some of those questions on that. We have on here also a hiring freeze, which is a little concerning to me, depending on the person that if we put a hiring freeze completely and we lose a department head, then we can't hire a department head there. So I think that I'm a little bit concerned about that. I don't know what everybody else thinks about that. Heidi's got something to say here. Let me move this over.
Could we do it to where the department heads don't just automatically do it, but they come to the mayor and they ask permission, and then the mayor can ask the council, hey, is this a situation? Like, for example, we know we don't have a planning director right now. So maybe the council would say, let's go ahead and get that. That's kind of important. Is that okay if we do it that way?
So what we're doing right now, absolutely. What we're doing right now anyway, and we've done this for quite some time, is anybody that is, when they lose a position, the department heads, when they request to hire that, they've got to fill out a justification of why that position is necessary and what we need to do. And so they've been doing that. But we've definitely held off on some, as you know. That was in last year's budget. I heard a lot of people say, well, you had savings here and savings there because you didn't hire people on purpose. And that wasn't the case, but there were some that we just didn't hire because I didn't feel that we needed them, and we were able to get through that. And so that process right now has seemed to be an okay process. I don't know if the council is disagreeing with it. So first of all, hold on. I got three of you. I got Linda, Rick, I got Chris and Claudia. So let's go that order. Linda, Rick, Chris, and Claudia.
Okay, on the issue of the hiring freeze, I would rather go with Heidi's suggestion of not saying that we have just a total freeze, but that any position that comes up that departments feel they need to fill, or like you say, it might be a department head, that they come to you and then you come to us, and then we look at that on a case-by-case basis. Another important situation with that is police and fire. If we're down people, then we may really need to hire some police officers or firefighters. So, and that's critical to being able to adequately serve our citizens. So I think to just say a straight hiring freeze where we absolutely will not fill any position is dangerous. And I think we're down already in both the police and fire departments from where we should be. So there is a potential need already to hire some more people. And I don't think we should just flat out say we're not going to do that. So I'd rather us look at that on a case-by-case basis.
So Linda, let me clarify one thing with that, because you brought up a good point. Our emergency services, our first responders, we're under contract to have X amount of people on the lines and stuff. And so
Yes.
Within the contract, they're the ones that are, well, I still ask them for the justification, but they're also the ones that it just gets passed through. And because they really, truly, we have to have police officers on the force, and we have to have firefighters. And it does take a little bit longer to onboard them after we hire. Then they have got to go through a rigorous training, and then and so we're automatically a few months out anyway when that happens. And
they're more critical than ever right now. So I just think we need to look at each situation as it comes up.
Sure. Okay, Rick?
Well, I agree with what Linda just said. This is the time of the year when we typically begin to hire a lot of temporary and part-time people for a lot of programs, whether it's street, whether it's Parks and Rec, whatever it might be. And I think a blanket hiring freeze would put Parks and Recreation out of business. They have about an 80% cost recovery. We're already probably going to see some savings at least this year because we haven't done that yet. We haven't opened those things up. We're not taking from the general fund, general revenues to pay that extra 20%. So I wouldn't be in favor of a blanket hiring freeze, but I think what Linda just talked about on a case-by-case basis, looking at the program, looking at the expense, and looking at the revenue that particular program will produce would be a much better plan.
Chris?
Yeah, I didn't hear that under no circumstances would we not hire anybody critical. What I heard is that the standard is a hiring freeze, which always leaves the option to approach you, Mayor. And then I very much like Council President Adamson's suggestion that rather than simply going to you, as has frequently been the case in the past, that it also comes to council because of the extenuating circumstances. But I didn't hear it the way some other council people have. I heard it as here's the standard, and as is always the case in my short experience, if something important comes up, the mayor and the council can always be approached by our staff in need.
Okay, Claudia?
Yeah, I just want to clarify that when I said hiring freeze, I meant clearly there's going to be critical areas where if somebody's if we need somebody, we're gonna have to figure that out. But especially when it comes to first responders. However, I just want to say that I do think that we can do a hiring freeze as far as attrition goes. I know that police and fire are fairly brass heavy. So when you have these higher positions, when these gentlemen or these women retire, we don't need to promote somebody up right away. They don't need to promote somebody up right away with the pay raise and everything else. They can figure out a way to keep things running, because what we really need is boots on the ground. And so if we have to hire patrol officers, that's one conversation. But I don't feel that we need a bunch of captains and lieutenants and whatever else they may be, especially in a situation like this when we have to pick and choose. I would rather pick and choose boots on the ground. So the other thing I think is that it's going to be important for the public to understand that by being willing to do this, maybe hiring freeze isn't the appropriate term, but it's important for the public. That's a message to the public that we are also thinking that we can't grow at this point. We can't grow this city bureaucracy at this point because everybody is suffering. So I think it's a message to the public that we're going to suffer too, which means we're going to have to figure things out and be creative. We're not just somebody quits and we're just going to fill that position. But I'm all about Heidi's suggestion and Linda's suggestion and Rick's about, taking things case by case.
Roger.
Historically and contextually, a hiring freeze in Pocatello has meant that we just look at whoever we're hiring more critically. And sometimes we say no, and other times we say we have to have that person. But it's to use a filter so that it's not just a carte blanche when one position is vacated that we immediately feel it. So I think in terms of the historical record of the city, a hiring freeze is people bringing their proposals to us and the council sits on the consideration of that proposal and makes a decision.
So are you suggesting, are we suggesting that every hire comes to council before consideration? And the reason I ask that question is there are a lot of hires that happen when it comes to part-time people. There are some necessity hires that have to happen in the water department, for example, or the street department. When you have a person retire or something in that crew because they broke out into crews, for them to be able to jump on that and hire that sooner than later makes that entire crew be able to continue to work. I'm trying to get some clarification on what exactly, because we've done a hiring freeze and we've gone through this a number of times. What exactly are we looking to do?
For example, if John Banks comes in and says, I need to hire 15 people, and he gives us what roles they have to fill, we decide on what his proposal is. If the water department says, I've had somebody retire and I can't get along without that person, then the council decides whether we're in a position to go forward or not. Normally, we take the advice of the department head that brings that recommendation to us. So I'm not saying it's individual. I'm thinking that it can be blanket for a crew that mows lawns and things like that. But I don't see it as any different than John coming in and saying, I can't hire anybody. Can you raise the wages so I can? Either way, we are kind of the gatekeepers.
Well, when there's an increase in wages, and we need that, then you hear about that and you evaluate that. I know there's a lot of hire. I mean, you're going to be responding to a lot of text messages, or not text, but emails and hiring. You're going to have a lot of meetings. You're going to add a lot of meetings to this, because you can't do that over. I'm talking to Jared right now. You can't do that over email, can you? It has to be in an open meeting.
We found the way to do this before, Mayor, and I don't think we were hurt by it.
Well,
We have HR come kind of present us so we can at least give like a blanket approval to some of the essential.
like, what do you present now?
No.
And
Oh.
we signed up to do the job regardless of what the job requires. So if because of this pandemic crisis, the job is going to require more conversations between us and more presentations, then too bad. That's just what it's going to take.
No, I don't.
In an ideal situation, it wouldn't be that way.
I don't think that we disagree with that at all. I think what I'm trying to wrap my arms around is there's a lot of requests that come in weekly. And a lot of them do come down to things like with parks, for example. A lot of the part-time is, we've got a class for dance. We need a dance teacher. Can we hire that dance teacher? To me, it's paying for itself. It makes sense. Chris.
Well, first of all, right now, Parks and Rec is essentially shut down except for planting flowers and mowing. So right now, I think, and we don't know when the stay-at-home orders and recommendations might be lifted. So I think right now, for example, it might be fine to advertise a position, collect applications, but that doesn't mean that we have to move on them. So I'm not, we keep using the Parks and Rec situation. I think that's a little bit different perhaps than, a patrol officer. So I think the first thing is that it will probably be somewhat clear, at least, which positions are time critical and which ones are less so. And for the time critical ones, they aren't going to be, every dance teacher and so forth, every seasonal grass mower. For those that are important and time sensitive, we ought to be able to find a way to converse as a council. For those that are not so critical, and we really shouldn't be hiring anyway because we have no idea how long this could go on. I think those can safely be put on hold, put on hold for the immediate future anyway.
Well, and so the council knows we have already done that. So we do have job requests out. We've got applications that are coming in. We've already done what you're talking about, Chris. We implemented that a couple weeks ago, where we'll continue to take applications, but right now we can't hire anybody. Doesn't make sense to hire anybody anyway, but we've got to be prepared to hire people. I know in the summertime here, we typically have a very difficult time. This year might be a little bit different, but we typically have a hard time getting people for parks, getting part-timers for water, street, WPC, I said parks, and then anybody else that has their part-time. And so we still have those applications out so that we have those applications out so that when the stay-at-home order is lifted, we can then start to do the interviews and start going through that process.
So that suggests, because we aren't going to be having, job requests for department heads coming in by the droves every day. So I was simply speaking to the idea that we really might not be inundated with, tons of job requests and hiring requests on a daily basis because of exactly what you've just described.
Well, we're doing some of those things right now. And so that being said,
Mayor?
yes,
I just wanted to comment on that. I think and we need to look at what the positions are. I don't feel that the council needs to be involved once we do get to a point where Parks needs to hire part-time people, or Water needs a part-time person to add to a crew, or, whatever the case may be. I don't think we need to look at every single one of those positions and discuss them. They know what they need, and I think they're in the best position to make those decisions. I would also go back to police and fire. I don't think we need to be saying whether they can, fill a position or not. They need to be able to do what they need to do to operate in the best way that they can operate. And that hiring process is kind of a long thing, and like you say, they don't onboard quickly or anything. So I just feel like and some of that's dictated by their contract. They have to fill so many positions a year. So I'm not sure that every position needs to come to council. I think we can look at which ones we should be deciding and which ones we don't need to.
okay. All right,
And
Go
that
ahead.
means that we need a process, because if council is going to be deciding which ones we need to look at, then that de facto means we have to have some sort of process and criteria that provide clear guidance for that process to move forward efficiently. So I don't disagree at all, but it means that there has to be a process in place and criteria delineated.
So will a lot of this be answered in the budgeting process as the department heads are? It seems to me like as they're coming in, a lot of these questions will be answered in that budgeting process. And then I think the council will have an opportunity to have a discussion about what we feel is necessary and is not as we're going through the budgeting process. And I think I don't know what you think.
About the hiring?
Yeah, about the process of hiring, what positions are important, what aren't important. I think when the departments come in and we decide to do or follow the cut a lot, I think that's definitely going to, as you're cutting, you're going to end up having positions as well. So I think a lot of that's going to be worked out. Yes, Linda?
And maybe that's how we develop this process that Chris is mentioning. During the budget presentations, each department is going to talk about their personnel and what they have currently and what their needs are in the future and everything. So maybe during those presentations, we can decide which positions are the ones that we would need to review and which are the ones that we wouldn't need to. So I think that could happen during that presentation process.
Mr. Mayor.
Yes.
Well, this is a budget session. If we set a budget and hold department heads' feet to the fire on the budget that they're given, I think the problem takes care of itself.
It's kind of what I was thinking as well, is I think that it's going to, most of these questions and concerns are going to be worked out during that process. I think is so. I think that it will. I'm just going to go down through here in the interest of time. Did you have something? Okay, I'm just double checking everything. I think a lot of things were said twice here.
One thing is we address the
Oh, yeah, thanks Heidi. Heidi just brought up the oversight on P cards and what's happening there. So we have a lot of employees with P cards. Every department head has to review everything that they spend monthly. But I will have, as part of Heidi or of Ashley's presentation, I'll have her make sure that she can explain the P card program, and then we can have that discussion when that happens. Is that all right, Claudia?
Well, just if Ashley's listening, I'm not sure if she's still on, but I'm going to want to know why everybody needs a P card and why the department heads, why they can't just submit like every other agency. If people submit to their department head, I need this is why, this is what it's going to cost. And then that department head handles that purchase, because we have a lot every month. Ashley gives us a report and we've got hundreds of thousands of dollars in P card purchases, and yet we have no idea what those are. And in talking with Ashley previously, I don't know that there is even a process within each department for really auditing, is that absolutely necessary to purchase? Or is that just something that somebody decided they needed and they went out and bought it because they have a P card and they have that discretion? So that's what I'm going to want to know from Ashley. Okay, perfect. Yeah, I think that we can get that report from Ashley and then we can have that discussion. So I think that's a good point. I think that, and there is a reason for it, and Ashley can evaluate that and give us a report on it. So I think that's a fair request. And then we'll have Heather looking into the healthcare as part of the CPI, what that looks like. I know, Roger, you mentioned that. And see what's going on there. I'm just going through here pretty quickly.
Brian,
Yeah,
that is not something that if she needs to look into it, all she's got to do is go to the site that I've got here.
sure.
It defines it, clarifies it. It's got I think a 12-page thing with the formula there.
Well,
So
it
it's
won't be,
definitely a part of the CPI.
I'll have her do all that so that she can give a report on that too. So yeah, I'm not saying it's a hard thing or a long, difficult thing. We'll just have her be prepared to talk about that. I think a lot of it is going to be already presented in the budget. Roger, talk to me a little bit about you said hold the employees harmless in insurance. We've always held them at a percentage. And if it goes up, then they also eat that percentage as well. What are you saying there?
I'm not sure that there are going to be raises available.
Okay.
And I don't know that. I would like to give raises, but if we can't give raises, then I'd like to, for the city to eat whatever the healthcare increase is.
Don't give a raise and then take all of it back and then some with the healthcare cost.
Well, I'm just saying that they have told us that healthcare is the most important factor of, not all of them, but most of them have said the continuing healthcare coverage is something they put above their pay. And if we don't give a raise, we can at least hold harmless the employees on healthcare.
Okay. And the discussion about a raise will also happen, but they won't automatically get an increase in CPI or anything without the discussion of the council. And so, Chris, you had a question?
Yeah, I mean, it's among the items that I didn't highlight in my list, but I really want us to look at overtime because sometimes you can reduce overtime by how you schedule. And I in a conversation with Heather, she indicated to me that we have quite a steep overtime budget, and I think we really need to look at how we are scheduling and why we need to have such a high overtime budget, because overtime, of course, as everybody knows, is a rather expensive way to fund your operation. So I think that's important.
Well, I think that they're planning on, I think Heather's been talking to departments, and I'll reiterate it, that they probably want to have an explanation of overtime and stuff. I know we do schedule X amount of overtime on purpose. For example, fire with their schedule, we have to schedule overtime because that's what it is. And so, but we'll have them prepared to be able to talk about overtime and what happens, and maybe cost-effective ways. So, okay. Anything else? I'm just trying to.
So I'm just not clear. Are we gonna ask the departments to come in with that 5% reduction?
Well, I've got written down that they need to come in with the reduction, and they'll know that 5% is what the council's looking at, but I want them to be able to explain what that's going to take and what it's going to, what effects it has for us. And then they'll come as close to 5% as they possibly can is what we'll say. And then we'll just have to have those discussions as we move forward. I think at least that's what I've heard. The kind of the sentiment of the council is, let's see what it looks like, and then let us make the decision if we're going to add it back in or not.
Right.
Okay. Unless otherwise, that's kind of the direction I'm headed. Let me see.
I'd also like to talk about the fact that departments can spend up to $25,000 without any oversight, simply because it's in their budget. And I think that that's too big an amount. I think that if whatever they need to buy is over $5,000, that it should come to the council. $25,000 at a pop is a lot. That's what I think.
You did actually say that in here, and I'm glad you reminded me of that. Actually, you didn't say it. I remember maybe you said it before.
I said it before, but Chris actually, I think, has something in her papers.
Yeah, I think that maybe that's where it was. And I'm glad you brought that up. My concern with that is anymore, you can't buy tires. Chris, or for example, Tom can't buy tires for less than $5,000. A program with IT isn't going to be, I mean, a $5,000 expense goes in a heartbeat. And so, I mean, I'm just going to throw out a concern that I have with that, but that's it. I understand the oversight idea, but I don't know if $5,000.
To me, it just means that they're just going to have to plan ahead and look at the big picture and say, this is what's coming down the road. So then they don't have to, not at the moment. Clearly, if Tom needs tires, he needs to be able to buy tires, but Tom should, I think Tom's very competent, and he knows in advance, in 3 months, I'm going to be needing tires. I'm going to need to make this expense. I'm going to talk to the council now so that 3 months from now, I can spend that money. And I don't think that that's an unreasonable thing. And I think that department heads are very capable of doing that.
Rick.
I think that's what the budget's all about, Claudia. When a department submits a budget, those things are in their budget for the year based on what they expect needs to be done. It's part of that planning. And we basically give them permission to do those things until they hit that $25,000 limit.
Okay, Chris, you
Mayor?
look like you wanted to say, oh, Linda, you're up.
I agree with Rick. I think that is part of the budgeting process. they tell us what their expenses are going to be, and they plan for those. But I don't think we need to micromanage, how they actually spend that money or when they spend that money. I think that would create so much extra work and difficulty for them to be able to do their jobs efficiently, which probably would end up costing more money.
Okay. Chris?
I think it's just important to have some kind of safeguard so that I can't spend $25,000 in 3 separate transactions and end up having acquired a $75,000 purchase or item or whatever, that although the dollars were in the budget, unless the budget we approve is line itemed out and we are actually approving line items, then I could create several scenarios in which I could spend $75,000 or $100,000 without ever needing any council oversight, just depending on how I structure the transactions. That's a concern to me.
So I think that's a violation of state statute to break up a bid or break up a thing so that you can do that anyway. And I can assure you, we don't have any of that. That would be the furthest concern from my mind, whether or not they're doing that, because we watch that pretty close. We've got an attorney that's like a hawk. He won't let us do a whole lot of anything without making sure it's done legally, which I'm grateful.
Does he go through the budgets?
What's that?
I said, so he's going through the budgets. Our attorney is examining our budgets on a monthly basis.
No, he's not doing that. But if there's something that they're purchasing, they know that they need a $75 item. He is definitely making sure that they are not breaking it up 3 different ways to get to that $25,000 mark.
How is he, I mean, I'm not trying to be, I'm just trying to understand how he's ensuring that if he's not looking at the budget.
It's all a contract. He's looking at contracts and materials and things that you're purchasing and
Purchase agreements.
Yeah, the purchase agreements and things, making sure that those are followed correctly. He's not looking, nor does he have time to look at everybody's budget to make sure that they're not doing that. But I don't see any of our department heads.
Well, and I'm not saying that that's what I'm thinking, but this is an organization with a large budget. When I talked to Ashley earlier in the year, I said, okay, so if I decided I wanted a new office suite, and supposedly first I said I needed a desk and a credenza and whatever else, that was going to cost $25,000, that I could do that just because I had the money left. And she said at the end of the year, and she said yes. And I said, and then if I decided I needed a coffee table and 3 or 4 leather chairs for people who come into my office, and that was going to cost $25,000, that I could do that in a separate purchase. And she said yes. That's where my concern comes from. So perhaps, there was a miscommunication there, but based on the answer to the question I posed, it actually heightened my theoretical concern, not my suspicion, but my theoretical concern that we might have a potential weak spot in the system.
Hi, Chris, it's Heidi. I just wanted to, sorry, we're about to lose the.
I'll lift it up.
Okay. I just wanted to make a comment, and Roger will remember this. We used to have on the council a lot more things that came before us. Like every time someone wanted to use a park pavilion for a certain purpose or something, it would have to come back before us. And so it was taking a lot of time in our meetings for stuff that we got to the point where we're like, okay, we trust John to be able to make that decision about the park pavilion. It doesn't need to come to us every single time. So my only concern, I totally can appreciate your concern, but I don't want to get us to the point where we've just got loads and loads and loads of things that we're thinking, oh, our meetings are now going super long because we've got every little thing and it's all coming back. And honestly, I do not feel like any of our department heads are dishonest and that they're trying to do anything shady at all. So I'm not concerned about them in the least. I know that they're overseeing their people and that the mayor is overseeing the departments, and I'm not worried that somebody's out there sneaking $25,000 furniture.
And also, I'm gonna try not to get twisted up in my chair again with my cord, but that is also something that the auditor is looking at as well as with the audits at the end of the year and making sure that that stuff is not happening. And so I'm comfortable doing what we've been doing right now. But Chris.
I asked Ashley what kind of an audit, because I said, presumably at the end of the year in our audit is where these kinds of things would be caught, should they be happening. And please, for everyone who's listening, I am not suggesting that we have dishonest employees. I'm looking at this as systemic security. Okay. So it's kind of like doing cybersecurity, not because you believe your employees are all trying to crash your system, but because it's a preventative measure. So that's how I'm looking at this. Ashley told me that when the auditors come in, they do random checks. They are not, in fact, going through and doing an item by item, department by department audit. She specifically said that they do random checks when I ask her. So I'm not here to quibble about that, but I just want to be clear that there are different kinds of audits. And when Ashley answered my question, she said random checks.
And I know that the auditor does do the random checks, and so that's true. Claudia, yeah, you're up.
Well, and I too, I'm not saying that I want this because I suspect anybody's being dishonest. That's not, but I can tell you that from my experience, I can't tell you how many pieces of gear and equipment and jackets and gloves and things that my husband has because somebody in the office decided they absolutely needed it. It wasn't researched properly. It's not the best piece of gear for the money, blah, blah, blah. And now there's closetfuls in the federal building of equipment and supplies and things that never get used because it wasn't thought through, but somebody, because it was within the range of spending, someone was just able to just buy it. So all I'm saying is that if we reduce that amount, then it's going to make people say, okay, is this the best way to spend this money? Is this the best piece of equipment or gear? And that's where I'm coming from with it. It's not about I don't assume that people are dishonest. I assume that people are honest. So it has nothing to do with dishonesty as far as I'm concerned.
Mayor, can I just comment on the audit really quick? This is Ashley.
Ashley, we're trying to keep this as a city council only, but since you're in, then go ahead. But I'm just going to tell all the department heads, Ashley's the only one that's going to say anything. It's only going to be this. So Ashley, go ahead.
So our audit covers, he does a random sampling of any purchases under $50,000. Anything over 50, he analyzes a lot more. He's looking for things like, oh, you bought a certain piece of equipment, and then maybe you bought something that goes along with that. Should it have gone out for bid? He goes through all of that in extreme detail. So, I mean, anything under $50,000 does not hit our materiality threshold. Therefore, I mean, we have a $108 million budget. So you have to look at the scope of how big things are as well.
Okay.
Mayor, could I make a comment too?
Yes, we got Linda, then Roger.
Just quickly, I appreciate that we're not questioning the honesty of our employees, but I also think we want to be very careful not to hamstring their ability to do their jobs efficiently. I think if they have to come to the council with every single little purchase, and I'm not suggesting 5,000 is an amount of money to sneeze at, but in the scope of our budget, as Ashley pointed out, that is a very small amount. And I just think they won't be able to be very efficient in doing their jobs if every single little purchase has to come before us.
Okay, thank you, Roger.
I think there might be a kind of a middle ground on this. I believe it was when Rick first came on the council, he talked about how some cities go over all the expenses in more detail than we do. That their city councils look at the detail of expenses. We get summaries, we don't get detail. And maybe we need to be considering how to get more detail, like P cards, if it's got $100,000 on it, we need to know how it breaks down. I don't know, but I do know that Rick brought that in. And I think it's because Rick was looking at our fiduciary responsibility. We are the ones who are accountable more so than anybody else for how funds are accrued and how they're dispersed. It falls on the council.
If I might, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah.
That discussion came up after Linda and I attended an AIC meeting last summer. It was a subcommittee breakout session, and the city of Boise, for example, sends a couple of briefcases full of receipts home with the council people every weekend. And I guess if this council wants to do that, and you're responsible for them, you pick them up Friday and you bring them back Monday morning, and you go through thousands of receipts to look at those things. It seems like a very tedious process, but it's what some cities do.
I don't know this, but I'm willing to bet that the city council members of Boise may pick it up, but I'll bet you them being looked at are very, very slim follow-up on double checking them, but I don't know the answer to that. Linda and then Claudia.
I'll just comment on that same meeting. Other than Boise, what we found was that it was mostly really small cities that were going through all the purchases. Boise was kind of the outlier on that.
Okay, Claudia.
Well, so if I understood Ashley correctly, then our material threshold is $50,000. So if y'all think that $5,000 is too little an amount, then what amount? Because to me, a $50,000 purchase, I've specifically asked Ashley, there have been items on her budget presentation, and it'll say commercial tire, $19,000. And I'll say, was this for one set of tires for a big piece of equipment? Or was this for multiple sets of tires to stock at Fleet Services? And she doesn't know. So my question then to the rest of you is, if 5,000 is too little, for me, 50,000 is too big. So what number would be appropriate? 20,000?
So what you are right. The number is 50. The council, we'll have to take a look at it and double check, because we had this discussion a year or two ago, a couple of years ago, maybe 3 years, the way time flies, who knows? We had this discussion. The state had moved it from 25,000 to 50,000. And so we followed the state's recommendation of doing so. And so that's why that number is where it is. It was 25. The state recognized that it's just too difficult for departments to continue to function and go the way they were going with the 25. They increased it to 50 with the talks of going even higher than that, but they stopped at 50. And so that's what happened. We're just trying to remember if that happened, and Jared's looking into that to see how that happened, if that was administrative after the discussion that we had, or if there was an actual vote on it. We'll find out what that looks like. I right now personally would, Chris, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say that as a council, we have an interesting pattern that I'm starting to see us repeat frequently. And that pattern is that somebody makes a suggestion, and then rather than actually discussing the suggestion particularly, such as 5,000 might be too small, how about this? What we then tend to do is go from the suggestion to an extreme interpretation where we're carrying home, someone it appears to be suggesting that we should carry home briefcases full of receipts. And this is a pattern that I've noticed in my time on the council. And I think if we could discuss the philosophical concern, which brings the question or issue to the table, rather than interpreting what the person might mean or how it would play out if it were taken to an extreme, I think we would A, save time, and B, be more productive in our conversation.
Well, I think the question was, I don't think that the suggestion was everybody go and bring home a briefcase of stuff. I think that was an explanation of the meeting where that came from, why that was the discussion, and where that came from. So I don't think anybody suggested we come and pick up a thing there. But
we did start talking about if council has to approve every little purchase.
Well, we did do that because that's ultimately what we're talking about.
But that is not the philosophical question.
So what is the philosophical question then, Chris?
How does council track expenditures to fulfill our fiduciary duty to the public?
We have that breakout, and if the council has a question on the breakout every month, the question can be asked about any of the other expenses or any expenses with a justification of that.
And Claudia has indicated that when she has asked that regarding the tires, she's been unable to get an answer. So it appears that, without playing any blame games here, it appears that the communication around numbers is somehow lacking, at least for some council members. That's the issue.
I know that we've asked for the same report that we're getting, but then with a sheet that has some of those breakouts and I know that Ashley and the finance department's been working on that to get that put together for us. And so I'm certain that is going to happen. It's just a matter of them generating the report to get it done and going from there. But in the mindset that they're also in the middle of getting a budget put together and doing the CAFR that has a timeline and doing all kinds. They've got some hard dates that they have to fit. And so I know that this is a high priority for us right now, but it's also the priorities are also great in other aspects of the thing. But I think the question is $5,000 the number, or do we want to stay where we are, or do we want to go in between? I personally think where we are is working pretty good if we can get some of the answers that you're looking for. That's what I think. And that's right. And every purchase agreement and everything that we do after legal reviews, it ends up going across my desk as the mayor and for a signature as well. So I'm comfortable with it, but if the council as a whole is not comfortable, then let's figure it out. Linda.
I'm comfortable with 50,000 too. I think we just need to allow our employees to do their jobs as efficiently as possible. So I'm comfortable with that number. I think Jared reviews any major purchase agreements. And we're audited, and the process, I think, accounts for these expenditures.
I think so. So it looks like on, in January of 2018 is when we had the discussion, or at least when the thing was prepared as an administrative matter for the policy there, that we would go to $49,999 or less. Everything else would go to the city council, is what it looks like. So in January 2018. And so when that came about.
I'm good with staying with that.
So, and I'm comfortable with it, but if we need to make some changes, then we can change. Are you?
No, I was just gonna say I'm also.
Okay.
So I'm also okay with that number, and part of my reason for that when we made that decision last year is because it has been very helpful to me to not have all of these things. I mean, we have limited time as people anyway, and so if we get a council agenda that just has item after item after item, and most of them are very straightforward, and it's like, okay, we're just rubber stamping, this is a no-brainer, we have to do this. That was one way for us to be able to free up some time and administrative effort, is to not have to have the lower dollar amounts come. And like I said, I'm not concerned from what I've seen that people are abusing that. And so that's why I'm okay with staying with the 50,000 amount. I appreciate your concern though. I don't want to discount it. And I understand if individual council members want more detail, I think we should figure out a way that they can, work with our departments to get the answers to those questions. But I guess at this time, I don't want to take a lot of extra agenda items that are, to me, unnecessary.
Well, and one thing also is, if it has not been discussed as a hard item in the budgeting process, and there's an item that comes up that's under the $50,000, that always comes in front of the council. So if we've got a purchase, example, vehicles, police vehicles, those always come in front, and those are all they're all under they could buy them one or two at a time and be okay, and they could stay under the 50,000, but they don't. They all come to the council. When they buy weapons, that comes to the council, and so I'm comfortable. But Claudia.
So then here's what I would like for myself, so that I know, because I feel like I need to know. Our CFO should be able to answer a question as with regard to what was this $23,000 spent on from street services, for example. What is this to commercial tire? What was purchased? She should know that. And if that means that the departments need to present different information to her so that she knows that, so she can answer that question, then so be it. And I'm going to say something because I'm tired of hearing about how the department heads have so many things. They're department heads. That goes with taking the job. The demands of a department head are different than the demands of somebody who comes in, clocks in, and leaves at 5 o'clock. So whatever those demands are, that's the job that these department heads took. And I think that us presuming that they don't want to do anything more than the bare minimum is fairly offensive. I think that, I just need more information. And if our CFO isn't getting what she needs to be able to answer questions, then the department heads need to give her what she needs to be able to answer those questions.
I think that she will always be able to get you the answer to what it is, but it's a difficult thing to know every penny that's being spent. And so.
Well, that's not the case, Mayor, because if I ask $19,000 one month on tires for commercial tire, and all it says is tires, repairs, and flats. So was that $19,000 spent on repairing flat tires? Was that spent on one set of tires? And our CFO doesn't know, because that's not how things are reported to her. So if the CFO doesn't know, then who knows? Who would know what that expense is? Because if you
director-
tell me we just spent $19,000 to fix flat tires, I'm gonna call bullshit. That's a lot of money to spend on repairing
Well,
flat tires.
I can assure you that the department head knows what that expense was for.
And
The
they
department
should be
head-
able to tell, the CFO is the one who should know. So if the department head knows, why is that not information not being transmitted to the CFO?
My experience is anytime that I have had a question on the sheet that comes to us at our council meetings, if I ask the CFO and they don't immediately know, they say, I will go and find that out, and they get back to the council. That has been my experience, and that's been with both Ashley and with our previous CFO. So I feel that it's unfortunate that we had a situation like this on the tires, I guess, but that has not been my experience, is that they have no clue. I mean, I think they truly and honestly do know what's going on, and they're able to get back to me anyway when I've had a question. So
Okay.
that's what I see.
So I agree. I think we're making a mountain out of a molehill on this, but I do understand that the frustration if you're not getting the information you're asking for. There again, I would ask the council, please, if you include me in those communications, I can follow up with that also, so that to make sure that you do have that information that's there. And so I know that Ashley works extremely hard in making sure that every penny, well, I know that she makes sure every penny is spent the way that we have directed it to be spent. So I'm comfortable with it. And do we need a motion to leave it the way it is? Do we need a motion to change it, or do we just continue? Personally, I think we can just continue on, but let's make sure we get the information that you're looking for.
I'll make a motion that we reduce the amount of material expenditure without approval to $25,000.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion by Claudia and a second by Chris. Rick, you have any discussion on that?
No.
Okay, anybody, any discussion? Then I'll ask Ruth to call the roll.
And you might have to repeat it. I don't-
She was gonna call your name and then I will repeat your name so you can hear. Ortega.
Yes.
Yes. Stevens.
Yes.
Yes.
Adamson?
Adamson.
No.
No.
Gray?
Gray.
Yes.
Yes.
Gina?
Cheatham.
No.
No.
Lurick?
Lurick.
No.
No.
Black?
Oh my gosh, Blad. Figured this would be the case. I think that we're okay right now, but I definitely want to have I want to follow up and make sure that you're getting the expenses that you need to have. And so I'm going to be a no on that motion. Okay. Yeah, Chris.
This is not a discussion for this moment in time, but I would very much like to have 2 items placed on future agendas at whatever time it is feasible.
Okay.
One is that we discuss the need for doing a thorough operational and fiscal and administrative analysis of our municipality in order to create a long-range plan that includes how we are going to move forward as effectively and efficiently and in as fiscally responsible a manner as possible. And the second item I would like to discuss is how, without overburdening our CFO, can council members get fiscal information they request in a timely manner.
Okay,
And that may lead us to a software discussion. I don't know, but I would just like those two items, understanding that the current budgeting process takes priority, but I don't want those kinds of things to get lost.
okay,
So,
Chris,
yes.
let me back you up to number 2. How, without burdening our CFO, to get information to the council?
To get information that council members request to them in a timely manner.
Okay,
So I really, to be completely clear, number 1 is to do a deep analysis of our municipality to determine if we are being as efficient and effective and contemporary as possible. Number 2 is to create a very specific goal-oriented long-range plan. And number 3 is to discuss whether or not our CFO has the tools she needs in order to respond to fiscal requests in a timely manner.
okay. Okay, I've got those 3. So
Thank you.
you added the goal, you added a goal one on there, the goal oriented plan moving forward.
You're right. I broke my first statement into 2
Sure.
parts, what I
Okay.
did.
All
For
right.
clarity. Thank you.
Okay, I've got those written down so that we can move on those. Linda, you unmuted and I guess you changed your mind?
No, I just left it unmuted and I forgot. So
Oh, okay.
I didn't have anything to add.
All right, sounds good. Okay, then what, I think the direction is clear for our departments to come into the budgeting process with a idea of reduced, with the understanding that 5% is a goal, and what does that look like so the council can make the decision on what services, what we're going to do, what we're not going to do, and I with that, and then what they can and cannot live with.
Mr. Mayor?
Next few years, yeah.
Sorry to interrupt. I do remember, I was just going to question before we move on, do we need a motion regarding the threshold? Do we need a motion to leave it where it is, or with
I
the
don't think
other
so.
failed motion, do we move forward?
I think that it would just stay where it is, but I think it's
Okay.
worthy of, if we're not getting the information that people are looking for and stuff, it's worthy of the discussion in the
Okay.
future. But I think I don't think we need
Another motion?
If we were going to increase it, then I would say, yeah, you need a motion, but I don't see any reason to increase it.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, I think there's direction. I think we have accomplished what we're looking for, unless I see somebody else that disagrees with that. Okay, that being said, I'm hoping that on the, what is it, the 23rd is when we'll have our revenue and our first budget presentations put together. Hopefully that's in a week and a half, so we'll have a couple weeks. So we'll be able, hopefully we'll have the time and be able to get what we need from the departments, and that we'll be able to have those meetings, and hopefully everything goes as smooth as, quite frankly, I'm hoping it does, and everybody recognizes where we are. But with that, if I believe that we've accomplished what we're looking at. I'm seeing heads nod and stuff. So with that, then, thank you very much, Council. I appreciate you taking time today to do this, and I really appreciate your patience with this meeting to get started here, this go-to meeting. And so now we have an idea, at least what we need to fix for the 16th meeting with the echo and the things like that, and we'll be able to move forward. And so with that, thank you very much, and we are adjourned.
Mayor,
Oh,
just one thing.
Yes.
This go-to meeting has some other capabilities that we didn't use. Some
Okay.
of us had written things that could have been shared on the screen, but it wasn't enabled, or I didn't know how to do it. So that could be something that would enhance these meetings going forward.
Okay, it has a capability. Okay, Chris is rolling around here.
Yeah, there's a chat feature available. If you look in the upper right-hand corner of your screen, there's a little like a thought bubble.
I'm not talking, does it come under chat feature? Or
Yes.
I want to post my screen to everybody to see.
You
I
can
think
share.
that has to be enabled by the
Yep.
administrator.
If you want to do screen sharing, we have to set that up and allow it. You just got to be careful how you do that because of some security issues and things.
Okay, hold on. I'm getting our attorney here is kind of nodding his head. What's the?
I would recommend against that. It messes up the record. It wouldn't be as visible to the public unless they're just part of the meeting instead of live stream.
So the recommendation is against something like that because the public will not be able to see what is on our screens unless we make it part of the live stream. Can we do that?
Or we just make the entire meeting a full meeting, if that's where they go instead of live stream.
We can probably do that. Ken and I will have to work out some of the.
Yeah, I'm just saying going forward, it would really be helpful, particularly when we get in budget things. I think that our presenters will need to be sharing that on screen with us.
Yeah, we actually had that discussion about what would happen with that because if we're in the same situation we're in now, you need to see what's on screen as well as the public. And so
We can do that.
it sounds like we're working on that and it sounds like we can get that done.
Okay, thank you.
But not the text between council members was the concern. Was more of a concern.
Yeah, I'm not talking about texting. I'm
Okay.
talking about sharing on the screen for the public.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Okay, that sounds good. But thank you, councils. Thank you very much for the patience in trying to get this worked out. We appreciate it. And please stay safe. And hopefully this ends sooner than later. Thank you. With that, we are adjourned.